All right, guys, can I get some thumbs up if you can hear me? We're not starting until 8:10, but I just want to make sure that everything's working for folks. All right, good. All right, thanks, guys. So you guys all ready? It's about a day and a half. What, Wednesday, 3 p.m. 40 hours, 44 hours for the exam. Thanks, Gordon, for writing thumbs up instead of actually giving me the thumbs up. I don't know what it is. Actually, everybody's writing it in the chat. Well, can you? I don't know. Is there? Oh yeah, hit the like button. The like button's much better. I like the like button better. That's good. All right, 8:10. So as we're going along, so I've got again. I'll wait until 8:10 before we get going to make sure everybody's on board. This is recording, so in case I speed things up and go through it quick, because I want to get through it in an hour. It's recorded, so you can go back and watch this whenever you want. Okay, hopefully before 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Also, I'm going to be covering the old final exam. So my last term's final exam, and I'm only going through the short answer questions. I'm not going through the multiple choice questions. Other professors they don't appreciate when I go through the multiple choice questions, so I don't. But short answer questions they're okay with because I think they're more me, right? Like they're purely me, so it's like quite, I don't know, you can see my personality come out in them a little bit more. So we will be going through those. There's 5 doozies that I've picked out. Actually, one of them might be my favorite multiple choice question of all time. Or not multiple choice. My favorite short answer question I've ever created. So I'm going to reveal that. I feel like a magician right now, kind of like revealing some secrets to my magic tricks. But anyways, hopefully it helps you guys study. So is my exam your first exam? I think I have a delay in seeing your comments, so I'll try to speak slower so that I can so that I can read them and then go back to them. All right, good. First exam, 523. We'll get the most difficult exam out of the way early, right? I think that's the good way to go about it. Let's wait 2 more minutes. I'm going to tell you something funny while we are waiting in that last couple minutes. I did something embarrassing. Well, not really embarrassing, but something kind of funny. So our family, we always do, matching pajamas for Christmas. One of those things that a lot of families do. So we bought these matching Christmas pajamas from Old Navy like a month ago. We bought them early. And anyways, for some reason at Old Navy, they didn't have men's. They had like the kids' pajamas, they had mom's pajamas, but they didn't have like dad's, like men's pajamas. The bottoms and the top that matches. The pants match, but not the top. I'd have to buy like an ugly Christmas sweater or something that completely didn't match. So anyways, I wanted to fully match. So what I did was I bought a woman's size. So I'm like a medium for men. So I bought medium men's pants and then an XL large woman's top because at least I match, right? And I assumed that it would fit. It was crazy in the store, so I didn't actually want to try it on. Anyways, I made a mistake because the arm sleeve is super short. It's like super low cut. Well, not like super low cut, but like for pajamas, it's low cut. And my belly button's showing. And the top is like really big for the boobs that that I have. So it was actually a very embarrassing wardrobe. Fortunately, only my family is going to be able to see it, but I think I've confirmed that my body type, my bottom half is a male medium, and my top half is not a woman's XL. I think I've confirmed that. Somebody's asking if I'll be posting the practice final exam like for the midterm. No, I will not. This is your final exam prep that you'll be getting. All right, guys, it's 8:10, so let's get the show on the road. All right, let's get the show on the road. Final exam prep. So here is the schedule that we had. Here's all the classes we had throughout the term, and based on the vote, we said that we were only going to focus the final exam for the end of the semester, so for these 5 lectures. Okay, so I'm going to have a short answer question from last year's exam for each of these questions, and we're going to go in order. Okay, and again, I'm going to try to get us out in less than an hour. Okay, so hopefully by 9, we'll get through it. 5 questions, so we should be able to do that. Okay, so at first, I'm going to go through the concept, go through a couple high-level things about each class, right, in terms of the slides leading up to it, and then present the question and the solutions. Okay, if you have any questions as we go along, please just fire away in the comments. Okay, when it comes to formal appraisal methods, here's the ones we really emphasized in class. I hope you recognize this slide. So in order, each one, the graphic rating scale. Okay, so graphic rating scale looks similar to this. You have the employee's name at the top, and then you have the behaviors or traits that go along the left-hand side. For each one of these behaviors or traits, you have the opportunity to use a Likert scale. So from 1 to 4, 1 to 5, I hope that you use 5 or an odd number, not in this particular case, an even number. And then you simply evaluate each trait. That's what a graphic rating scale is. The employee's name at the top, and then you have behaviors or traits along the left-hand side. AG's asked, this is recorded. Yes, this is recorded. You can just review it on YouTube, actually. The alternation ranking scale is where you have a trait or behavior at the top, and then you have the employees' names on it. So you have multiple employees' names throughout. The paired comparison is that you're actually comparing person to person. So you list all the possible pairs of employees, and you indicate which employee is higher ranked for each behavior or trait. The forced distribution method is simply referring to you're evaluating each employee and you're ranking them against one another. So you get what percentile that particular employee is. So for example, the top 15 percentile of performers might get a promotion versus the bottom 15% might be terminated or don't get any form of merit increase. A critical incident method, you can think of it like a diary. Okay, you're keeping a record of uncommonly good or undesirable behaviors of an employee's work-related behavior. So anything the person does incredibly well or does incredibly poorly, you write down and you keep a little journal of it. You take notes on December 5th, this occurred. On November 2nd, this occurred. To really keep a diary as to what happened. Okay. So last year, this is the performance management question I had. Okay, so for the past 10 years, you have worked at General Electric as the Director of Human Resource Management, and during your time at GE, you were instrumental in implementing the forced distribution method for performance appraisals. So A, describe the forced distribution method. Okay. So we just went through it. Again, you recall from your memory or from the slides, this is what forced distribution would look like. Okay, it's worth 1 mark, so you don't have to explain it in a huge amount of detail. 1 sentence, maybe identify these different percentile groups, and you're good to go. B, what is one positive and one negative of this particular method? Okay. So again, if I don't think I actually wrote these out on the slide, so you have to think more critically as to what it would be. What is it? Well, it can be highly motivating and transparent. So you'll always know when you receive a raise, promotion, or even a demotion, not demotion, but like a termination. So it's incredibly transparent, and because of this transparency, it can be highly motivating. It can be a highly motivating tool for a particular performance. But on the flip side, it can create a toxic environment. Okay? particularly if you are a low performer, you don't want to, you're thinking more about yourself than collaborative or team efforts, and as a result, it can create a toxic environment where you're not helping out others. You're really focusing on your own performance. C, you recently accepted a job at another company that uses critical incident method for performance appraisals. Describe the critical incident method. Okay, so in this case, you're just again drawing from memory or from the slides. What is the critical incident method? Okay, so again, it's that diary, it's the keeping a record of uncommonly good or undesirable examples. Okay, and naturally, the next question is what's one positive and negative of the critical incident method? So again, I didn't include this in the slides, but if you think critically about this particular method, it helps employees to learn more about this approach as it is based on actual employee events. So it's whole based on the idea that because you're receiving more rich information, it's a better developmental tool than some of the other methods or approaches, because you're learning the specifics about the context that was involved where you performed either good or bad. On the flip side, the negative component is that it focuses on each employee. And because it focuses so context heavy, you can only examine one employee at a time, and therefore it limits comparability across employees. And if you're limiting comparability, it cannot be used as in a method for establishing pay. Because anytime you establish pay, it has to be based on something that you can compare across employees. And then here's the most challenging question, okay, of the group E. This new organization is much smaller than GE, but it is looking to grow. It also has a very strong collaborative culture. Make the case that the smaller organization should adopt the forced distribution method for performance appraisals. So I'll just give you 10 seconds to think about this a little bit further. Fill this up so you can see what I look like. Although as soon as I click the button again, it's going to go. I haven't figured it out very well. This system, this setup. Okay. All right. Let's just do it. All right. So E. So when you're thinking about this question, okay, because this is the stickler, this is the most challenging one, right? So when you're thinking about this one, I'm going to put this up so you get a better perspective as to what I'm looking for. Okay. So you need to make the case that you should adopt forced distribution. So anytime you're trying to argue something, you would say the positives associated with that particular method and perhaps the negatives associated with the approach you're moving away from. Okay? So that's the main argument approach you want to take. Now my thinking is this organization is smaller but looking to grow. Perhaps when you're trying to grow, you want to recruit and retain the best talent. So because you're trying to grow, you should be using forced distribution because it is highly motivating and transparent. It'll be easier for you to recruit high-performing employees with the forced distribution because it's so motivating and because it's so transparent. Okay? And perhaps you want to also make the argument, because you're trying to grow, that you need to have a greater comparability across employees. It's not just a small organization anymore, so you can't focus on the context of each employee. You're looking for comparability, and that's why you're wanting to grow. Okay? That's one approach you could do. The big idea is that when you're making an argument, you identify the positives associated with the direction you want to go and the negatives associated with the direction you're leaving or where you're leaving from. Okay, 2 comments. If they already have a strong collaborative culture, they understand better pressure flat on that forced distribution. Perfect. So Kenya has a cool idea in the comments, which I'll let you guys read there. And somebody's asking for the difference between paired comparison and alternation ranking. So let's flip back real quickly. So alternation ranking is where you have one trait and you rank everybody on the same page, okay? And paired comparison is just simply another way to display the data, okay? So instead of having a single list, okay, you would have it for everybody, right? So you'd have, I'm showing you with my hands, and you can't see me. You'd have like two lists. So you'd have people's names here and people's names here, and you'd have a matrix. So you're comparing every single person. Now, the reason why that could be helpful is if in an organization one person is sick, then you can figure out, okay, so say Billy's here, Billy's sick. Well, who's better than Billy at this particular skill, right? And I'm going to try to ask all these people that are higher performer than him on that particular behavior to fill in to see whether they can come in when Billy's sick. That kind of idea. Okay. All right. Moving on. Rewarding and recognizing employees. Good. If I'm moving too fast, let me know. I'm trying to keep this under by 9 p.m. because I have a Negroni waiting for me and carrot cake. Yeah, it's been one of those days. Okay. So when we talk about rewarding employees, okay, we predominantly talk. There's two different ways to reward employees. There's monetary and non-monetary rewards. In class, 99.9% of the time we talked about monetary rewards. Okay. We talked about monetary rewards. We didn't talk about non-monetary. Non-monetary, like you can think of it like some organizations have like opportunities to meet the CEO. So they might have like coffee with the CEO competitions, or they might have like games where if you win the game, you can have a pizza with the president. Again, it's opportunities, interpersonal opportunities to meet people who can either help you out personally or help you out professionally in your career, like that kind of idea. But in the class, we predominantly talked about monetary rewards, okay? And we talked about cash payments and benefits. Cash payments, or like think about like base pay, merit pay, incentives. Okay, anything where you get dollars in your pocket, and benefits are indirect financial payments. And those are things we talked about in terms of like vacation, insurance, things of that nature. When we talk about pay, one of the big things we talked about was establishing pay rates. Now, there are 3 stages when it comes to establishing the pay rates. One is job evaluation. So the job evaluation piece is something that happens within an organization. Okay, you are simply looking at your own organization and evaluating every single job. Okay, you can think of creating a test, okay, a single exam, and having every employee in the organization write that exam, right? And then you get a score associated with every employee. And then once you have that score, you'll be able to compare employee or compare job to job, right? To figure out the relative score of every single job. Okay? Stage 2 is you're conducting a wage or salary survey. Essentially, that's when you're going out to other organizations. So stage 1 is inside the organization, stage 2 is outside the organization. That's when you're searching for and seeking similar organizations, and you're trying to figure out how much those organizations pay in their own organization, but for a similar job that you would have. So say in your organization, you're looking for how much to pay an accountant. So you'd be looking at other organizations and how much they're paying their accountants, and that would be stage 2. Stage 3 is simply where you're combining. So you're looking at every single job and the points associated with every single job in your organization, and you're comparing it to how much jobs are receiving in other organizations. Okay. To do a little bit of a deeper dive, which is relative to the exam question I'm going to take up, is step 1. Okay. So it is job evaluation. So that is a systematic comparison to determine the relative worth of a job within a firm. So again, you can think about it in terms of you create this exam or create this test, and it's a special test, and you have everybody, you evaluate every single job in the organization to figure out the score associated with every job. Okay? One way to help you with this is the benchmark jobs. Okay, so these are critical to the operations and commonly found in other organizations. So a classic example of a benchmark job in a restaurant is a head chef. Okay, so it's the idea that Every restaurant has a head chef, so when you want to compare the relative worth of a job in your organization to the relative worth of a job in other organizations, you classically look at the head chef, and your job is relative to that. Okay, another key idea is compensable factors. So these are factors that allow you to establish the score of a particular job. And there's 4 that we've talked about in class. There's skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions. Okay, so these are all 4 factors which are required by pay equity legislation that helps you determine the relative score of a single job. Okay. So here is my rewards or compensation question. I'm just seeing Rowan's comment in below, and he says, why do you compare force distribution and critical incident? Because that was what the exam question asked you to do, okay, in the previous exam question. Okay, so let's read through this. You were recently hired as a general manager at a high-end restaurant in a rural community in Northern Ontario. There we go. There I am. Over the past few years, the quality of food preparation has decreased in your role, and you're hoping to turn this around by hiring higher quality employees. Okay, so a few things should jump out when you're reading this. One, quality is decreased, so that's something you're trying to correct, and you're hoping to turn this around by hiring higher quality employees. Okay, so the big thing you're trying to do, the behavior you're trying to do, is you're trying to hire higher quality employees. Okay. So what benchmark job may you use as a base for establishing pay of the sous chef? Okay. And we just talked about this. A benchmark job that you're likely to use in a restaurant is a chef, a head chef. You're likely to use the head chef because every single restaurant on the planet has some kind of head chef. Okay. The second one, prior to advertising the job opportunity, you need to figure out how much to pay each employee. List the 3 steps in establishing pay rates. So again, we just talked about that. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and again, it's 3 marks. So as long as you list them out just like this, you would get the full marks. The third one, there are 4 compensable factors required by pay equity. What are they? Okay. There's 4, asking for 4, so it would be half a mark each. Okay. Again, you would just list them. I am not asking you to explain them or define them. Okay. And then the last one, again, this is the tricky one of the bunch. Okay. When comparing the head chef to the sous chef, okay, so I'm specifically asking you to compare 2 different jobs. Which job is likely to receive more points for each of the compensable factors and why? Okay, so in this particular question, I'm asking you to compare the head chef to the sous chef, and you're going to figure out who gets more points for each factor. Okay. In the previous question, I asked you to identify what the 4 compensable factors are and why. In here, you're going to say whether you think the head chef or the sous chef should be higher when you're evaluating each job. Okay, when you're evaluating each of these factors. Can anyone have a guess for the first one, for skill? Who do you think has more skill, a head chef or a sous chef? Guesses? Has anybody worked in a restaurant before? No? A head chef. Head chef definitely has more skill than a sous chef. If you don't know what a sous chef is, the sous chef is basically like an assistant to the head chef, works under the head chef. Maybe that's what threw people off. Essentially, when you're talking about this, you would identify a head chef and then you would try to explain why that might be the case. Okay, so you'd say, perhaps the head chef has to demonstrate more creative skill when they're working because they're actually creating the menu, and that kind of idea. Okay? And then you could do a similar analysis when you're talking about each of the other factors. Okay. So for effort, you could say yes, they both have a similar amount of effort. Or if you wanted to, you could say head chef, because head chef is expected to be there for longer hours than the sous chef. That is fine. As long as you defended your answer, you would be okay. But this is the approach that I was hoping that you'd take. Looking at each of the 4 factors and identifying one job has higher skill than the other or the same, and then you just have to explain it. The working conditions should be the same because they're both working in the same location. Responsibility, perhaps the head chef has more responsibility because they created the menu or something along those lines. Okay, they're more responsible for the restaurant, opening and closing the restaurant or something like that. Okay? Good. Knowing your rights and responsibilities. All right, so there's a couple things we talked about in this lecture that's relevant to the exam question, and that is turnover, okay? Involuntary turnover. Okay, so Ella says, would we need to put our answers in sentences, or can we use the same format like skills head chef? You can definitely just list them like this. If I ask you to explain them, kind of like here, I say why as the question, but if I ask you to explain it, then you would definitely have to write out a sentence. But if I just ask you to list it, then just bullet point is the way to go. And even if I do ask you to explain something, you can still use bullet points. You don't need like a like a multi-sentence or paragraph format, intro, conclusion sentence. No, you can still use bullet points. Okay, knowing your rights. Okay, when we're talking about involuntary turnover, there are 3 different reasons why involuntary turnover occurs. Just cause. So it's cause, right? A causal reason. Okay, so that's when you're terminated. When you messed up, you did something wrong. You did something that causes a termination. Okay, that's reason 1 for involuntary turnover. I should also note, involuntary. There's 2 different types of turnover: involuntary and voluntary. Voluntary is when you choose to leave an organization. Involuntary turnover is when the organization asks you to leave. You do not have a choice. It's not voluntary. You're involuntarily told to leave. Okay? Number 2 is downsizing, where there is a permanent restructuring or change in organizational direction. So that is permanent. And then the third one, layoffs. There's temporary financial pressures, cost-cutting measures put in place, with the understanding that things will resume as normal once those financial pressures are alleviated. So the layoffs are temporary, downsizing is permanent, and the termination is also permanent, but it refers to one person. Okay, speaking about layoffs a little bit further, because the exam question we're going to talk about is about layoffs. It is a temporary withdrawal of employment to workers. So the keynote here is that it's a temporary withdrawal. Okay? And then I have some of the conditions here. There's no work available, or the situation is expected to be temporary, and management intend to recall the same employees. So it's based on the idea that there is a temporary reduction in demand or customers, and that's why they're letting people off. All right, so for alternatives, there's multiple different alternatives for the layoff. One is pay reduction. Okay, pay reduction is based on the idea, instead of laying off, say, 20% of workers, one thing that you could do is you could actually reduce the pay by 20%. Okay, use of vacation time is another one. So instead of saying, hey, laying people off for 4 or 5 weeks, you could say, hey, you know what, guys, why don't you use your vacation time for 4 or 5 weeks? You continue to get paid because it's your vacation time, and then once your 5-week vacation is up, then you can come back and we're going to continue working again. The use of contingent workers is saying, instead of hiring employees and then laying them off when the demand is low, you could say, I'm going to hire contingent workers, which are contract workers or part-time workers, and you're only going to hire them when demand exists. Okay? So instead of laying off people when demand is low, your contingent workers idea is you're hiring people when demand is high. And work sharing is based on the idea of when demand decreases instead of laying, say demand was cut in half, instead of laying off half of your workers, you could share half of the jobs between two people. So essentially, for every single job, you'd have 2 workers. So you could have one, I would work this week, you work next week, and then I work the week after, where you're like alternating. So you'd be sharing jobs. Okay? That kind of idea. And here is my downsizing question. Okay, so a few months ago, the General Motors plant in Oshawa laid off many of their employees. And just to go through each of these questions, so what are layoffs? Okay, we talked about it a little bit. Here's the definition: a temporary withdrawal of employment to workers. How do layoffs differ than downsizing? Again, we mentioned this. Layoffs are temporary withdrawal of employment to workers. Downsizing is permanent. So the big thing I want to stress here is layoffs are temporary and downsizing is permanent. They both involve large groups of workers and not just one worker. Why do organizations lay off employees? So you can explain this in a variety of different ways, but essentially it's the idea that there's no work available, or there's a decrease in customer demand, or seasonal work ends. So there's a couple different components to it. Your demand or work available decreases, and 2, it's temporary, and 3, management have the intention to recall employees afterwards. Okay, so with the question it says, why do organizations lay off employees? Well, then you can explain it over 2 marks. So this would be a sentence or 2 sentences where you're simply saying those facts. Okay. I think my final bullet here doesn't really make sense given the General Motors plant example. Now let's say it's seasonal work ends, the snow shoveling. Unless they are making vehicles like snow plows at General Motors, I don't think that really fits. But you get my idea that I'm trying to get at. And explain 2 alternatives to layoffs. Okay, again, I just listed those. Here is 4 different examples, but I needed you to explain 2 of them. Okay, so in this case, Ella kind of speaks to the comment of, can you use bullet point or do you have to write it out? In this case, you would have to write out your 2 examples. So 1, you'd get 1 mark for identifying them, and then 1 mark for explaining it. That's all. All right, understanding labor relations and collective bargaining. So naturally, given my affinity towards negotiating, this is actually my favorite exam question of all time, okay, coming up, that I've ever made, okay, so I'm quite excited to share it. So a key part of this question is understanding what the bargaining zone is, okay, so as I explained in class, there's 2 different ranges. The buyer has a range and the seller has a range, okay. Speaking about the seller first, the seller's minimum acceptable offer is $5,000, and the seller's initial offer, or the high point of the range, would be $8,000. So technically, if an offer was made anywhere between $5,000 and $8,000, the seller would be willing to make a sale, to sell the product, for a transaction to occur. Now, the buyer also has a range. The initial offer, or the low point of the offer, would be $4,000, and the maximum acceptable offer is $6,000. So technically, if a seller was selling a product anywhere between $4,000 and $6,000, technically a transaction would occur, and the buyer would be willing to purchase the product. Now, anywhere between $5,000 and $6,000 is actually what the bargaining zone is. A stronger buyer would purchase something closer to $5,000, and a stronger seller would purchase something closer to $6,000. Okay. And what if the parties can't reach a deal? Well, there's three different parties, if you will, that can get involved. Okay, a conciliator, a mediator, and an arbitrator. Okay, here are the definitions. Conciliation is the mandatory use of a neutral third party to bring union and management together to negotiate. So the key idea here is that it's a third party, so it's not the union, it's not the management, it's a third party, and they are forced to be brought together, and they're forced to use a conciliator to help the union and management resolve their negotiation. Okay? Now, the outcome of the conciliator is not mandated. Mediation is the voluntary use of a neutral third party to help reach a mutually satisfactory collective agreement. So the idea here is that it's a third party, however, both the union and the management voluntarily choose to use the mediator as a sign of good faith that you want to continue your negotiations. So you want to use a mediator to continue the process. Again, what a mediator recommends, if they recommend anything, or just help with the process, if they recommend anything, it is not a mandatory conclusion or outcome. An arbitrator is the imposition of a settlement by a third party. So it's all about the idea that whatever the arbitrator says that will be the final outcome. And that'll be the final outcome. So here's my exam question. So you're a teacher in Ontario, and as such are part of the teachers' union. Your union is currently in collective bargaining with management to determine the pay of new teachers. Okay, so here's ABC, and I know that I like this question a lot because of part C. I think the figure for some reason threw a lot of people off because I guess you don't see a lot of figures in short answer questions. I don't know. Anyways, let's start with A. Okay, so your union has not been able to agree with management on the rate of new pay for new teachers. Your union is considering using a conciliator or a mediator to help your organizations. Please explain the difference between a conciliator and a mediator. So here's 4 marks. So 2 marks for explaining what a conciliator is, 2 marks for explaining what a mediator is. Okay, so here are the definitions there. In negotiations, is a conciliator or a mediator likely to be first used? And I think I asked this in class, so I'm going to jump to the punch a little bit. So a mediator. So the mediator is typically what is used first because either group can either decline the decision offer, and mediators in general work to support both positions. So it's the idea that you're using a mediator first as a sign of the good faith that you're going to negotiate before then, I don't want to say get serious, but before being forced to use a third party that mandates a decision. A conciliator would be something that could be used if a mediator does not work, if neither group can agree on who the mediator is, but a conciliation would be used. Now, for my favorite part of the question. Okay, in figure 2, represent the positions of the teachers' union management in Ontario and Quebec. Please explain, using the numbers, what the bargaining zone is in each province. Let me put my little face back up here. Okay, guys, take a guess. No, I don't want that. I don't want that. Sorry. Okay, so those are the unions. Please explain, for each of the provinces, okay, so in figure 1, Ontario, what do you think the bargaining zone is? And in figure 2, what is the bargaining zone? To write it out, it's actually quite simple, but I think it threw people off to have 2 different figures. I'm not sure what threw people off, but let's see if you can guess in the comments. Rowan nailed it. In figure 1, there is no bargaining zone. Good. A lot of people did not get that. Okay, and in figure 2, I guess Ron's the only one chiming in here. I'll save it. Okay, so no bargaining zone in figure 1, absolutely. And in figure 2, it's from 65,000 to 100,000. That is the bargaining zone, because again, it's between the lowest for the seller, if you will, and then the highest for the buyer. Perfect. So a bunch of people got that. Amazing. Okay. So then that's it. That's really all you had to say. Figure 1, no bargaining zone. Figure 2, 65 to 100,000, and that was it. You would have got 4 marks. The trick is, I think this is what threw people off, really, to be honest. The no bargaining zone in figure 1. That's kind of tricky because it was something we do not cover in class. Okay, continuing. International HR. Any questions? No. All right. So there's, in terms of international recruitment, there's 3 different people we've talked about. Okay. So there's expatriates. So these are when we say, so being Canadian, if we're to open up a Lululemon and we're to open up in Iceland, okay, expatriate will be a Canadian person moving to Iceland to work there. Okay, that's an expatriate. You're from a home country, the country where the company originated. A host country national would be, if we're opening up Lululemon in Iceland, host country, the country that is hosting the company is Iceland. A host country national would be an Icelandic individual. And then a third country national is somebody who's not from the home country and somebody who's not from the host country. They'd be from a third country. So you're not from Canada, where Lululemon's from. You're not from Iceland, where the company is being opened up. You're being from another country, such as Germany or Ireland or China or somewhere like that. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, so we have home country is expatriate, host country national, and a third country national. And when we talk about recruitment, we can say that there's a variety of different factors. We can talk about brand, compensation, development, and culture. Okay, we talked about this in length in class, so I'm going to leave this up there, but I'm not going to talk about this because we did talk about this already. But there's 4 factors that are important when we talk about recruiting internationally. Okay? Also, when we talk about training international, one of the biggest things that's unique about training in an international environment is language training. If we're moving to a country, if Lululemon is moving to Iceland, for example, opening up a store there, language is a big difference. They don't speak English, as I think they do speak English in Iceland. I like Iceland, but they also speak Icelandic. So if you are to move from Canada to Iceland, you probably want to learn a little bit of the language, if not become fluent. Another thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have training associated with culture. So cultural sensitivity training. In the idea that you can better interpret the behaviors and the attitudes of individuals in that new country in a manner that makes more sense. Okay? Another thing that's important is you're not just focusing on the individual, you're thinking about the family as a whole. Okay? So you're not just training one person, you have to train the entire family. Because if you don't train the entire family, you can there can be a lack of fit. Okay, so say for example, if they only focused on the one family member, and then the kids and the other family member go, but the other family member doesn't have a job, perhaps there would be a lack of fit, and this other family member would want to leave that country sooner. Okay, and then you would have one person drawing you away from the country, Iceland, as well as the job. Okay, so that's why trying to find a fit with the entire family, train the entire family, try to embed the entire family in that culture, in that community, is very important. Okay. Also, sometimes when we talk about training, it can also lead to career development options, such as moving from one country to another country. So it's the idea that if you do relocate temporarily, it can give you more opportunities to work in a variety of different facilities, areas, or in this case, when I talk about it in class, different mines. So different opportunities exist, and it can really develop your career. Repatriation is simply the idea that when you move from a home country to a host country, and then you move back to the home country. Okay, you're returning back to your home. Okay. Here is my international HRM question. So you work as a VP HR at Canadian Tire. You are planning on opening a new location in Spain. Okay? So you're opening up a Canadian Tire in Spain. I wonder if you're going to call it Spanish Tire. So part A, please identify and explain 2 challenges that you may experience when recruiting employees for the Spanish location. Okay? So in this case, again, in class on the slides we identified 4. I'm only asking you to identify 2. Okay? So, but it's worth 4 marks. So you would get 1 mark for identifying the challenge and 1 mark for explaining the challenge. Okay? So you don't even have to remember all 4. You just have to remember 2 of the 4 in this particular case. And then you decided to hire Canadian managers and relocate them to Spain. Unfortunately, you are experiencing high turnover for your Canadian managers. Why might this be occurring, and what can you do to improve the situation? And again, we just kind of mentioned this. And as the employee was previously a manager in Canada, you know that the availability to do the job. Okay, so you know they have the skills. You know that there was a good fit for the person and the job. So the turnover is likely due to the person and the location. Okay, because you know that the person liked the job. There's no turnover because of that. So the turnover is likely due to the person and the location fit. Okay, and as a result of that, or as a result of person location fit, it could be anything related to the language, it could be family discontent, or actually you just dislike the location for whatever reason. Perhaps you're used to living in a metropolitan, a big city like Toronto, and if you had to move to a rural location, you just don't like, there's no nightlife, there's no, I don't know, you don't like the food in that area, or whatever. So it's the idea of location. Okay? So what can be done? So there's a couple things that can be done. And here's just some ideas. You can offer training for new managers. Okay, so clearly there wasn't a good enough training for this particular employee, as well as these employees that are leaving the Spanish Canadian Tire. So you need to really improve the training associated with new managers prior to the arrival in Spain. The second bullet is to try to find a job for the spouse in Spain. If that is part of the reason why people are leaving, then try to work hard to find some type of job to embed the spouse in that Spanish community as well. Whether that's in Canadian Tire, or Canadian Tire will have partner with other organizations to find a job for the spouse. And the last is to take managers on a trip to Spain in advance to see if there is a fit. So again, you're not just training the managers about what it is, what's it like to live there. You're not just trying to find a job for the spouse. You're actually taking them physically to the location, showing them what it would be like, to see if they think it would be a good fit with either the schooling, the location, the restaurants, the food, the community, something along those lines. Sam's confirming exam is chapter 7 and 11, not 6 to 11. That is correct. It was and that's all for my review. I'll show you the chapter 7 to 11. So each of the topics we just talked about will be on the exam. And that's it for all the questions I have for you guys. Is there any other question that I can help answer about the final exam? These are the 5 chapters that you're going to see. I just reviewed my old exam, short answer questions related to my old exam. Hopefully that'll give you some guidance in terms of how to study, in terms of the types of questions you will see on the exam. I'm going to give it 1 minute, see if anybody has any clever questions or comments or anything along those lines. If not, I'm available email up until the 2nd before the exam. So if you have any questions after this, email me and I will respond, because I know it's a stressful time period. And I'm the first exam that you guys have, so I'm going to do really good. I'm going to try to do really good and help you alleviate some of your stresses. Vince says, for the short answer, you have 7 questions and choose 5. But that is correct. So I will give you 5 questions, okay, 1 of each of those 5, and then I'll give you an additional 2. I forget which ones I picked. And then you have to choose any 5 of those questions. So you only have 5 to choose of the 7. Double checking exam is 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Yes. Can you explain the mediator and conciliator again? I will. Ella says the same, 7 versus 5, yes. Yes. there any need for a calculator? There is zero need for a calculator. Fist pump, no math questions. Good. All right, guys, that's it. I'm going to explain the difference between mediation and conciliation one more time, and then that is it. There we go. That's the difference. No, what you can do is, the big difference is the first word, voluntary versus mandatory. So it's the idea that when you have a union and management, you have two different groups and you're trying to negotiate. Sometimes one group is saying, hey, I'm talking with my hands and you can't see anything because I don't have a picture of me. Sometimes when you have two groups and they're negotiating, one group is more upset than the other group. Okay, so one group will say, hey, I think that we're really far apart. If I'm buying a car, buying a car is a bad idea. I'll just say it anyways. If I'm buying a car and I want to buy this car for $6,000 and you want to sell it for $8,000, and I'm like, I've already come up from $4,000 up to $6,000. Like, come on, I'm really trying. Why don't we use a mediator to help with the negotiation, right? So, me trying to buy this car, I'm like, I'm really trying. Let's use mediator. Try. But the other group can say, no, I don't want to use a mediator. You're not putting in any real effort, so I'm not going to use the mediator. Okay, so it's just it's an option that you can choose to use it to help with the process. The conciliator, though, is a mandatory use of this. Okay, so you have to use this, and even if you like it or don't like it, you might hate the conciliator, but you have to use them to help you out through the process. Amazing. All right, guys, that is it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, I'm on email nonstop between now and your exam. Best of luck. And I guess I'll see you guys Wednesday after lunch. All right, guys, take care. Bye-bye.